Welcome to your awakening. Please take pause as your reality is adjusted.
Well, that was a big white screen all of a sudden. Click the button. Click the other button. Alright, stop the screen share. Yeah. And we're back. Welcome back, folks. Another broadcast episode edition, podcast thing, whatever. And this moon day evening, a minute or two late. Yeah, it is an excellent show already so far. Thank you, Helicopter Pad. See, the sarcasm has already begun. It's because it's got the word love in the title. You know, people talk about trigger words at the moment. You put something like that in a title and people will automatically start getting triggered and defensive. Their bristles start hackling, or their hackles start bristling. Anyway, yeah, this moon day evening, the 17th of the 9th, 2018. I did mention it on Wednesday on the last reality chat. I apologise, I missed last week on the, would have been what, the 10th, the day before 9/11, 11/9. And I had intended to do a broadcast and talk about all that kind of stuff. But I was preoccupied, how can I say it, making plans for Nigel? No, making plans for myself. Working towards stuff that I've been working on for a number of years. So, yeah, it was a big step forward for me. So it was an opportunity that I couldn't miss out on, which meant, unfortunately, other things had to be put on the back shelf, and I didn't return home in time to be able to set up and do a broadcast. And it was, well, yeah, it was supposed to be the 9/11 stuff, but we've talked about this 9/11 stuff multiple times now, and there's a good body of information, you know, that plenty of people have done. I've done a few shows or broadcasts where we talked about 9/11, the evidence, the theories, blah, blah, blah. So it's sort of like, well, okay, this year, it gets put aside for a week. And then I spent the rest of this week being really ill. I'm still not exactly that well at the moment. So if I cough and splutter at you, I apologise in advance if I don't get to the mute button in time. And it might be a shorter episode, and I'll see how I go. If my voice holds up and I don't dribble too much snot, it's basically just flu, you know, winter cold, whatever, as the winter's coming in. And I'm glad I got it now, because now I've had this year's version of it. That means, you know, I'll be sorted for the rest of the winter, hopefully, unless they release some more altered versions. But yeah, anyway, before digressing to whinging about my own health and whatever, yeah, physically feeling a bit rough and worn out, but mentally, psychologically, spiritually, energetically, yeah, I'm there. Yeah. I might be a little bit distracted because I've been chugging on the cough medicine and it's supposedly non-drowsy stuff. But you know what it's like, makes you a little bit euphoric, almost like you're a little bit drunk. I remember when we were kids, we used to pinch all the cough mixture and drink it because it made you feel like you were drunk. But again, I'm digressing, so I'll get on with it. So yes, I am here again this week. This is a broadcast again, a Sol Excalibre, Good Morning Global Gulag. I think I prefer the sounding a signal to cut through the noise. Is I think a better comment to use as a brand if we're going to use anything. But let me get my note page up and get into trying to explain why the title this week and the subtitle isn't exactly anything separate from, it's just a sort of furtherance of the main title, which hopefully will make sense once I try and explain what the main title means. And there's been some synchronicity for me with some of this stuff recently. There seems to have been a general just sort of lack of direction in most of the media. I'm not talking about really the mainstream media. I'm talking about this kind of internet stuff that goes on. Some people call it the alternative media, but it's media. It's people's opportunity to put their stuff out there, whatever it is they're doing. These formats, these social media formats, etc. It's a way of you putting content out there, whether you do it for money or whatever. But that there doesn't seem to have been any major direction of what people are talking about, other than the lead up to the 9/11 anniversary and people putting out their commentary on the 9/11 stuff, all that kind of stuff. My opinion on the GDL, what's GDL? Is that not Godlike Productions? No, GDL. I've no idea, mate. I don't know what it is. Explain the acronym to me and I might get what you're asking. GDL, it's not Goyim Defence League. It's not that shit, is it? That's entrapment, mate, as far as I'm concerned. If that's what you're referring to, this new meme that's been pushed around of the Goyim Defence League. Yeah, it's an entrapment process. It's typical Anti-Defamation League tactics. Get people to express themselves as being anti-Semitic so that then they can be easily labelled and marginalised, ostracised, maybe even prosecuted, etc. And all it does, even if you claim that it's genuine, I would say it's very ill-intentioned, because by attributing or aligning yourself to that principle of you're the opposite of them, you just justify their claim to authority. So you're taking on the label that they want you to take on. You're saying, yes, I am Goyim. I'm so Goyim that I'm going to set up a defense league of Goyim. In other words, you are acquiescing to their claim of power, that they are the chosen special ones and you are the Goyim. I'm not Goyim. Yeah, so this whole idea of join the Goyim Defence League, prove that you're against the Jew and all that, it's entrapment. Even if it was genuine, it's ill thought out. Thanks for the question, but let me try and, before I run out of breath and start coughing and hacking, there's a few things I want to mention tonight. Some of it is not all necessarily directly linked to the title. It is loosely, but it's more the amalgamation of stuff that was going on recently for me. And it seemed highly appropriate and synchronistic that stuff came up recently that, brought me that direction or pointed that direction out to me, highlighted that direction, maybe signposted. I heard some good news from people recently about they've started a new relationship, or they've got engaged, or good stuff has happened for them in respect of that, what people see as the classic kind of depiction of love. That's great. I think it's interesting as well, the correlation to the time of year and its reflection of the traumatic, tragic events of 9/11. The events of 9/11 are used as trauma control, trauma-based mind control, and they're all about death and destruction. They're all about the entropic force, and those who think they're in power, the usurpers, trying to convince the rest of the world that they have so much power that there's nothing you can do. It's that kind of oppressive mind control manipulation. So what's kind of like, nature always seeks equilibrium. Always. It's like a natural law absolute. This environment, this thing that we describe as the natural reality that we experience, always, always, always is trying to get back to equilibrium. to some kind of harmony, some kind of balance. You know, I don't mean in respect of like good and bad and evil, and no, don't think of it like that. It's like energetic balance. It tries to get to a state of equilibrium. So in that, could it be that it's, you know, coincidental timing, or is there something else going on here, like Sheldrake's concept of morphogenic fields, where because there is this extreme trauma, this extreme definition of death and that kind of entropic destruction, what the natural world, the reality seeks to balance that. So the balance is we're getting this rise of people finding each other. Yeah, love in that generalized use of the word. Yeah, so I did wonder about that, and that's part of what sort of got me thinking this direction of seeing and hearing things going on in, you know, my environs, the people I interact with, the channels I follow, as well as in real daily life, you know, not the internet life. Yeah, even though they're one and the same thing, basically. It's just this is, you know, a medium that we communicate through. But there's been various stuff going on recently like that, and it made me attuned to it, maybe, or spotted more of it popping up. You know, sometimes you don't realize something's there until once you spotted the first one. You know, it's like seeing a certain color car. You think you've never spotted one before, but then all of a sudden there's one, you know, every other car is that color. You go, oh yeah, there's one. Once you spot that first definition, then you start seeing it pop up all over the place. So anyway, it seemed to me that there wasn't exactly a singular direction other than the 9/11 event that most people were talking about. But then these sort of synchronistic signposts started popping up, and I saw people uploading stuff that, you know, may not have been directly talking about the principle of love, the element of love, maybe, you know, discussing the different definitions and uses of that word, because it's a word with multiple meanings, and it's a word that gets misused in many ways because of its multiple implications. Yeah. So those kind of questions don't often get asked. It just gets pushed out there in the sense of like, oh, love this. Yeah, like the hippie generation, the love generation. So what kind of love are you talking about? But that was part of I would argue anyway, I am arguing, that was part of the game plan to take the energy of the social movements and gatherings of the time and manipulate it under that catch-all barrier when they can go, well, hedonistic sex is love. So be the love generation. Do nothing but go to orgies and take drugs and, you know, lullabouts, cavorting and kind of caressing each other. And we call that the love generation. And it all gets very corrupted and polluted. And the original energy, the generative love energy, the creative love energy gets swamped by this just materialistic, hedonistic bullshit. Yeah, so it's not like I saw people saying it in that kind of direct way or questioning it in that kind of direct way. But it was alluded to in a lot of the stuff I was looking at. And as I say, it made me wonder, is this a natural reflection or reaction where people are trying to balance that traumatic, what's the word for it, legacy? The trauma legacy of the 9/11 events. You know, it's been however many years now. It's been basically the lifetime of an adult. You know, from birth to the age of 18. There were children born in 2001 after September 11th who are now reaching adulthood according to most countries' legislation. Yeah, they'll be 17 or 18. They're considered adults in the social norms. And this thing is still rolling on, just like many other events that roll on for multiple generations and never actually get addressed or healed. Yeah, it's meant to be a constant wound that is used to manipulate people. So now, before I go any further and start going more towards trying to explain the title, some other stuff I want to mention first, because this is, as far as I was concerned, this is synchronistic. Yeah, the fact that this came up during this weekend where I'm thinking about this kind of stuff and noticing these things and whatever. Jam Noise put up a video that was I don't remember the title exactly, but it's something like Open Letter to Kip's Clips. And she was just asking him some questions. And, you know, I'll leave that up to him to answer if he wants to, or talk about it if he wants to. But I thought it's got to the point where, because I haven't spoken about it directly in any way on a live broadcast, I think it's about time I did. Because otherwise this could potentially roll into something that is not helpful, not useful to people. You know, it just perpetuates the problems, which is a part of what she was asking about. You know, that's the reason why she did a video. And I thank her for doing the video and giving us a shout out, because she mentioned about the fact that we don't seem to be doing things as a group anymore and stuff like that. And I know it's been at least a few months now since I did sort of mention it ages ago, where I said things along the lines of, you know, sometimes people change direction and you no longer go in the same direction. So, you know, the expectation that you must turn up and participate in what they're doing, even though it contradicts your own point of view, your own principles, your own arguments, your own attitudes to life or whatever. And do you really do that? How long do you do that? Is that not just compromise? How far do you compromise yourself? At some point, you have to draw a line. I feel that's my approach. That's my personal point of view. You know, there are lines, there are boundary lines, and at some point, you have to draw a line. If things are going in a direction that you don't feel comfortable with, you know, sort of say, I didn't feel comfortable with, you know. So I just thought the way I'm saying it sounds very aloof and third person. You know, I did not feel comfortable with the direction things were going. There was far more that I disagreed with than I agreed with anymore. So it was like, no, sorry, mate, I'm not interested anymore. Don't want to put my energy into what you're doing. Yeah, because I think you go in a completely inverted direction. You're now helping the system. You are justifying the system. You are encouraging people to go back into the system. You have become a sheepdog. Yeah, and for whatever your reasonings are, why you're doing it. So, like I said, you know, if he wants to answer her questions, that's up to him. I'm not going to speculate on it. I've got my own ideas and whatever, but that would then just sound biased and shit like that. Yeah, and I know. You know, this is part of the reason why a lot of the time it's not worth bringing these kind of questions up, because there are people out there, and this is seriously nothing to do with paranoia. You are being extremely naive if you think this is paranoia, or you're being willfully ignorant because you're scared of the evidence. You're scared of the realization that the evidence presents to you. There are people, individuals and groups in this environment who will deliberately try to propagate the destructive elements of what's going on with your situation. They will try to make hay out of your problems. They will try to utilize it as ammunition to attack you and other people associated with you. They will basically try to use it as a destructive hammer to fuck up your shit or other people you interact with. Yeah. And to me, in the long run of what is going on here, that is not useful to anybody. So the best way to deal with it is to just leave it alone. Don't prod it too much. You know, don't ignore it. Don't deny it. Don't pretend it doesn't exist. But don't feed it. Don't feed the trolls, as the saying goes, you know? And there's people out there that would love to have a field day with going, oh, he's pissed off with him now. Oh, trouble in paradise. Ha, ha, ha. See, this proves we were right. Yeah, they'll use it for all those kind of fucked up mentality thinking processes that justify their own bullshit. So, yeah, that was the main thing, really. Like I said, I don't want to speculate on stuff, and I don't think there's any merit or need to go into details about this, that, and the other. As far as I was concerned, like I've explained, I'm going this direction. I'm going to keep doing my thing. Yeah, whichever way he's going is now whichever way he's going, and leave it at that. And yeah, I thank Jackie for saying what she said and asking the questions, and see what comes of it from there. See how things move from there. Yeah, my main concern is to keep this flow going. I know that might sound a bit wishy-washy to some people, but yeah, how can I put it? I think the older I've got, the more simplistic things become, because they can be addressed more directly. You don't have to overcomplicate things because you've already been through all the complications. It's like looking at a required calculation, and you know all these different formulas of how to work out that calculation, and you've done all those formulas so many times that now you just look at the equation and you go, oh yeah, it's that. Yeah, you could say that's laziness, and that's falling into repetitious patterns, and a rut, that kind of restrictive, comfortable rut of thinking and biases and prejudices, etc. I would agree to a certain degree. It's definitely true that as the older you get, the less likely to change you are, because you find the things in life that you are comfortable and happy with and they suit you. Yeah. But I think it's also true that as part of the aging process, the more wisdom and experience you acquire, wisdom is just applied experience, knowledge learnt from experience, from gnosis, and the insights from that knowledge that is gleaned, that is wisdom. Yeah, and wisdom is applied. It's not just in your head. That grows with age, and at that curve is when you start to see more of the detail fall away. So now I no longer feel the need to go through endless reams of information and evidence to try and prove my argument. I don't need to, because I know the information is out there. So all I need to do is signpost you about certain topics. You'll go and look it up for yourself, and you'll look through all that for yourself, because you need to, because that's gnosis. I can sit here and tell you this, that, and the other, but I'm not your authority figure. So just because I say it doesn't make it true. Yeah, if you think that's the way this works, then you're still stuck in that mindset of projecting your authority onto me. Don't stop it. But anyway, yes, that was why a lot of the stuff to do with that at the moment. Sorry, long explanation. But yeah, I'm doing my thing. We'll see what comes from here. I know a lot of these things are going to seem quite disjointed. Hopefully they'll make sense to people once they get towards the end of what I'm ranting about. Some of the other things I watched recently, really graceful, did a video about the Illuminati trading cards. And I thought this was so spot on in the space of like 15 or 16 minutes, because she's got a real skill for doing that. She's good at putting a lot of information into a concise format that's well presented, easy to understand for the majority of people. And she touched on several elements that I've sort of mentioned or talked about over the years so many times. And it's just like, wow, somebody's took bits and put all that together, and boom, there you go. And it's like, wow, thank you. Yeah. And that was about the connections through going into the 90s, and this links into some of links into some of the stuff I'll get into in a minute, or maybe in 10 minutes or whatever, to do with the rise of the gaming culture during the 90s, during the 90s, the electronic gaming culture was only just beginning. So the consoles were just starting and people were beginning to form those brand demographics, you know, the ones that liked Nintendo or Sony and all that kind of argument, Microsoft, Xbox versus this, that, and yeah, all that was only just building up in the 90s. And it was still very popular to do tabletop gaming, board games or role-playing games where it required a certain amount of imagination. You know, you were required to imagine the scene and the setting. You know, you weren't presented with a visual image of it. It was a bit nerdy. It still is rather nerdy. You know, it is a bit of a cliche, a niche demographic. I was going to say cliche. What's cliche? A niche demographic for people who maybe, you know, they got that kind of bookish interest in information and stories and creativity, and it's applied into a game environment. And part of the rise in that gaming culture through the 90s was Steve Jackson Games, and it was immensely influential. Immensely. I lived through that time period. I watched it develop. I bought some of his products and I watched how the different companies bounced off each other from lots of little independent groups, like Steve Jackson Games started out, you know, as a little independent publishing group, and they eventually formed into these monopolies that could command quite a lot of resources and monetary value. You know, things like Citadel Games that became Games Workshop now produces multi-million values worth of computer games based on their original tabletop games. But anyway, part of this was because I was interested in that culture. I used to do tabletop gaming on a very regular basis, at least once a week, sometimes twice a week or more. I ran a continuous campaign based in Tolkien's setting, in the Lord of the Rings setting. I ran a continuous campaign for 10 years that was nearly every single week, where, you know, I would organize the game and I would run the game, and, you know, several people would turn up and participate. So it was a fairly major part of my life. So I watched a lot of this stuff happening. And at the time when Steve Jackson started bringing this stuff out to do with the Illuminati, I'd got a little bit of knowledge about some of the secret society stuff, a little bit of, like, I'd heard the name Illuminati before, yeah? I knew that it was some kind of secret cult that was supposedly high up the pyramid and this, that, and the other, and it was into the occult and blah, blah, blah. You know, not much knowledge, basically, just a few words and phrases and a little bit of information. But it struck me as interesting. It's like, why is this guy mentioning stuff like that? And then the more I got into it, I found out there was another game system that he was part of producing called GURPS, GURPS, something like General Universal Role Play System, something like that. And they had a whole massive volume, one singular volume, all about the Illuminati. And the book you bought was called a module, and it was meant to be all the information you needed to host a game, you know, to organize and set up and run an adventure game for people based in the world where there is this Illuminati group. And one of my friends bought a copy of this module, and I had a look at it and I started reading it, and I was like, what the hell? This has actually got some genuine information in it. What the hell is going on here? And then at about that time, just as the internet was starting to rise from about 94 onwards, I'd got first computer that was internet capable. I'd started surfing the internet, and that was what you could describe as the golden age of free information on the internet. You have a question about anything, you could go and look for it online, and guaranteed you'd find loads and loads of links connected to that stuff. Got a question about Freemasonry? Go and have a look. You'll find loads and loads of links of information and people presenting info about that stuff. So my learning process started accelerating. And I'd seen more about those kind of secret societies, the Illuminati as well. I'd learned about Weishaupt and the original Bavarian, you know, they say the original, the main group of the so-called Illuminati, the Bavarian Illuminati. Yeah, and I'd seen the what is, the supposed genuine historical accounts of that stuff online. And then I see this book that's all about the Illuminati. I'm looking for it, and it's got the same information in it. And I'm like, so they're taking this stuff that has been, for quite a long time, has been somewhat, not exactly deliberately totally hidden information, but you'd have to be quite inquisitive, and you'd have to be good at using a library to find out this information before the onset of the internet. And now all of a sudden this internet is growing, and the information is quite readily there. And at the same time, they're encouraging this subculture interest in those kind of things, those kind of topics and groups, etc., etc. That caught me quite a lot at the time. I could remember, really did make me stop and think, like, hang on a minute. And the cogs were whirring, and it was, for me, one of the steps towards seeing that bigger picture. There is actually an interweaving conspiracy going on here, where they utilize media and culture creation to feed into the public consciousness certain ideas and concepts and directions. Made a hell of a lot more sense to me then. And then as things went on, Steve Jackson Games brought out other things, such as the cyberpunk system, which, when I first started, we had a go at that. One of the guys bought a copy of it. We played some games of it. It was one of the popular ones amongst the gaming group I was in. Yeah, we used to play it fairly often. And that contains so much stuff that is accurate to now, and the supposed things that are going to be happening within the next few years. In the book itself, or in the game itself, it takes it to the extent of implant devices and cybertronics and stuff like that. Supposedly, we're not quite there yet. Certainly not commercially available to the general population. We're not there yet, but we're on the brink of it. And all that stuff was introduced into the subculture at about the time where it corresponds with the growth in the internet and other subculture elements like music content and art content that all followed a similar line towards basically transhumanism. And the Illuminati and that kind of occult element, the hidden information, you're special because you've had access to the hidden information. It was all very much like little bits of cheese to lead people along to their generalized knowledge, their now successfully cartoonified and pantomimed knowledge base of what the Illuminati was and is doing, supposedly. And that's just one name of secret societies that have been fed into that subculture knowledge base. Maybe I should say faux subculture, because they've deliberately created it in the same way as they did similar in the 60s with the hippie movement, where they fed them a certain amount of occult knowledge that allowed them to mess with people and to, disperse their energy of working against the system. Anyway, that was a really long explanation, but I thought, again, that was so spot on. The video that she did, if you haven't seen it, go and check it out. If you don't know about the trading cards, it will maybe make a lot more sense, a lot of the stuff I've just ranted about. There were a lot more things going on in the 90s that now, looking back on it, I can see how they were laying the seeds ready for what's going on right now. The dominance of social media and the manipulation of people en masse via that internet medium. Very, very influential during that time period of the beginnings of the internet as we know it now, the World Wide Web. And that connects in as well to, I was listening to Jeff's show on Saturday. He did another marathon 7-hour show with his Patreons. But because I've been ill, I've just been sat here wrapped up, and I thought, yeah, 7 hours, I'll listen to that. I'll have it on in the background while I'm mooching, looking at other stuff and whatever. And it was another good conversation, but it is 7 hours if you want to work your way through it. It might take a while to go through it. But there's a lot of stuff they talked about in there, like they do. When you have a big round table like that, you cover a lot of different topics. But there was a lot of stuff they mentioned during that show that, again, synchronistically added into me seeing things that connected into this love generation, the new love generation, and how it is being shaped and molded at the moment. And maybe some of the stuff I was seeing or getting a sense of was some of that kind of like budding of the elements of that love generation. That might not make any sense, but anyway. Okay. Yeah, the one thing in connection with, I know this is one of Jeff C's favorite topics, talking about the transgender agenda. I've said many times now, I think it's a stepping stone towards transhumanism. And that was partly why some of the things that occurred to me is like what we've been seeing over the last year or 2 years is a lot of supposedly feminine appropriation of masculine roles. And the reason I say supposedly feminine is because the more I looked at it, the more I felt and thought that they're not actually feminizing the masculine roles. They're masculinizing. I can't even say it. They're turning the women into men. They're masculine. Yeah, whatever. I think you know what word I'm trying to say. The feminine, and then putting it in to the male role. So they're not taking back their power. I say they, like it's a singular group of people, but you know what the gender agenda's like at the moment. It's part of government policy, basically. They're doing this. But it's not that they're taking the feminine and putting it into a role that used to be dominated by the masculine. They're not. Guarantee you they're not. Maybe in a few occasional cases, the exception always proves the rule. But what they're doing is taking somebody who should be feminine and they're masculinizing them. Oh, I said it. They're masculinizing them and then putting them into that role and going, oh, look, we're taking back the power from the patriarchy. Well, no, you're not. You're just forcing that person to switch gender and then claiming that proves that they've taken that role up. And part of the synchronicity for me of this was because I was dog sitting last week, well, part of last week anyway. I got the opportunity to subject myself to some BBC propaganda programming, just to see what the crap they were pumping out at the moment. I think I mentioned it on Wednesday. They were still pumping out the lies about the situation in Yemen and Syria and the white helmets bullshit that they've been promoting. But one of the things that kept coming up, because the BBC loves to advertise itself so much, they claim that you pay a fee so that you don't have to see adverts, but what you see are endless adverts for the BBC. But one of the things that they kept advertising was the new Doctor Who they've turned into a woman. So we're taking back the patriarchy. The 10th Doctor is now a woman. You get the Kabbalistic connections there. There's been 9 Doctors previously, and now this 10th one is a woman. But again, they showed some stupid advert clip of just the character herself. But again, they're not taking the feminine energy, the feminine traits, elements, principles. They're not taking the feminine and putting it into that role. They're taking the feminine and then masculinizing it, putting it into that socket and saying, there you go, look, we're taking it back now. That's not really taking back those roles or giving women a fair, equal chance to do things that have been dominated by men for however long. That's not what they're doing. So it got me thinking about, well, if they're happily enabled and encouraged by government policy and propaganda to do this faux appropriation of the male-dominated roles, if what they're after is equality or a balance of the number of roles, an equality of the male and female people taking those slots up, then why haven't they done the same thing in the opposite direction? Why isn't there a Wonder Man? Instead of Wonder Woman, there should be a Wonder Man. And I don't mean take some ugly ass tranny and get him to dress up in Wonder Woman's outfit and, so that's what, no. I mean, take the masculine energy and put that into that comic character role and start calling it Wonder Man. What about others? Like, instead of Joan of Arc, you have Jack of Arc. Take the masculine energy and put it into that role. If they want equality, then let's have equality. Those roles that used to be feminine dominated, all the women should be removed from those roles, and now it should be all masculine men, not emasculated, not the beta males, effeminate, modern trendy man. No, a masculine man, a lumberjack. Yeah. I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. Yeah? But I think hopefully you get what I mean. Yeah? They're not truly exchanging the roles. What they're doing is taking what used to be feminine energy and fucking it up by masculinizing it and then claiming that they're doing that gender swap thing. And that then got me thinking about the Hegelian extremes. The transgender agenda is utilizing that lure, that hook of the magic pill cure of, oh, well, all your psychological trauma would be solved if you just chopped your penis off and got some breast implants. Then you'd feel better about yourself. Whereas, the actual reality, the evidence of the situation, the majority shows that doesn't hold any water at all. That doesn't prove true. But they're not truly transferring the roles. They're using extremes and magic pill promises that push people to extremes. But the end result, the long-term end result of that synthesis via the two polarized extremes would lead to androgyny, the androgynous persona. What does that serve? That doesn't serve anything except that transhumanist agenda, where they want to remove the ability to procreate from the general population. Now you will be required to utilize some kind of technology to create a baby. The actual physical act of sex will not be possible anymore because nobody will have any sex organs, because they've convinced everybody that they don't really need them because you can just pick and choose whatever sex you want to be and put the virtual helmet on and be whatever you want to be. If you want to have sex with a paving slab, they've got a virtual reality experience for you. The other one I thought of as well was characters like Jane Austen. Imagine the uproar if you said, like, oh, right, okay, we've got to appropriate that role now. We've got to take back the matriarchy. We're fighting against the matriarchy. We now want a story written about John Austen. Instead of Jane Austen, it's going to be John Austen. It's not really about equality. It's about just sowing seeds of confusion that lead people towards the extremes. And out of those small numbers of extremes, the general populace will be forced into a synthesis between the two extremes. So you'll end up with androgenized, no masculine or feminine energy. It's not one side or the other. It's just null. No. And that then brings me to triplets and 3 dimensions. I was listening to Steve's show on Saturday as well, on Saturday night. I missed the one on the previous Saturday because that was when I was traveling, so didn't get a chance to listen in. But I wasn't going on holiday. I was going to fetch an item, basically. It was something I've been after for a while. But I listened to his show this Saturday, and he was talking about the Fibonacci sequence. And he was bringing up some really good points. Like Steve does, he played us some tunes during the show, and he was talking about a few other things as well. Some of it connected to this aspect, this principle of love, and the love requires the two genders to come together. But he also got into talking about the Fibonacci sequence. And how there is within that sequence another sequential pattern of triplets. The pattern repeats every 3 digits or every 3 numbers. You see another repeating pattern. And that got me thinking about the power of 3, the fact that mother, father, child, the basic principles that a lot of the occult so-called power is based on. They're just trying to usurp the natural power that we all have to be able to create life by getting together in union with somebody of the opposite sex and making a baby. But they like to usurp that triumvirate, that trilogy, that trifecta that is the most powerful point of the emanation of the generative force, because it's at that point that it can become 3-dimensional. I think I might have mentioned this a while ago. You start from the singularity or the single point, then you get the first element of the duality, so that you can have the balancing game that equals the oscillation that is the energetic force that makes all this stuff happen. But then you get to the third element, and that enables 3-dimensional points, so that you can actually start creating things in 3-dimensional space, because it's just flat on a piece of paper kind of thing if it's just 2 dimensions, if it's just duality. So I was thinking about that kind of stuff, and I was listening to what Steve was saying. It's worth watching if you haven't watched it. Like I said, he was getting into some interesting stuff. I think it was interesting anyway. But the general chatter in the chat box didn't seem really very happy with the fact that he was talking about things that took a little bit of thought. They may seem a bit complicated to some people or off-putting, because he's talking about things that it's not solid stuff, mate. It's not material. I can't put my hands on it, therefore it's meaningless. It's just words, was one of the comments I remember somebody put in the chat. And that's a common argument of, it's just meaningless. It's just words, mate. You're just saying words. It doesn't mean anything. The pen is mightier than the sword. You can chop loads of people up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're changing their minds or the minds of all their relatives or anybody else who's witness to your crime, etc. You can keep doing it again and again and again, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to change people's minds. I think one of the Gandhi quotes is like, you can beat me and whip me and even kill me, but then all you'll have is my body. You won't have my acquiescence. You can't have my soul. Sticking to your principles in that respect, holding your ground, holding your space. Listen to Max Egan's broadcast as well, which I thought fascist dickheadism is quite appropriate for a lot of the just ridiculous stuff that's going on at the moment, like the Trump craziness and whatever. It's just like, I feel like I'm watching through the window of the lunatic asylum, and that's what's happening in there. I'm watching a crazy show, a bunch of crazy people carrying out a crazy show, thinking that they're convincing other crazy people that they're all sane. Oh, I'm not the crazy one. I'm the sane one. It's all you that are crazy. But listening or reading some of the chatter while I was trying to listen to Steve and think about what he was saying and presenting, and it just got me thinking about that level of compassion and love. And if you're interested in having a better life, then isn't that about love? I know you could try and argue that a certain element of destruction is required to give you a good, happy life. But I can easily argue back that that argument is based on a presumption that is given to you by this system itself, in the same way as their kind of presumptive bullshit of divine right of kings, or everything is materialistic, that you don't need to worry about the things that are non-physical. That's all just words, mate. That's all just magic. Really? It's words that can destroy a nation. Yeah, you'd need a really big sword to smash a nation, but you use words, and yeah, it doesn't take that many words, and you can bring down an entire country. Yeah, the right words in the right place at the right time, and they spread like ideas do. You can't kill an idea with a sword or a nuclear bomb or whatever. Yeah. Maybe you could argue that you can if you genocide absolutely everyone who's ever even heard the idea, therefore you just eradicate it from all knowledge except your own knowledge, because you knew they had the idea and that's why you were eradicating them. Yeah, see what I mean? It's a chicken and egg argument bullshit. But thinking about that kind of stuff and some of the other stuff, and then I saw Jam Noise's video pop up and I thought, this is all very synchronistic to me. And then this afternoon, I listened to a video by Pockets of the Future, one of his longer videos. I tend to watch his talking stuff. I'm not so much into when he's talking about the celebrities and that. Yeah, I get why he does those videos, but it's just I don't feel any need to watch them. But listening to his longer stuff, and he was replying to a question in his comments about why does God allow bad things to happen. Yes, there's some mention and talk of God here, folks. If you don't like the God stuff, you better leave now. No one gets out of here alive. Just remember that. Yeah? But listening to what he was saying in that video, I thought even more so, this is now synchronistic. He was saying a lot of the things that I've been thinking about over the weekend. And it's like it's a classic. It's not exactly fallacious. It is in some elements, yeah, but it's more just a sort of mistaken or misguided approach, a misguided question to ask why does God allow bad things to happen? Yeah, in the theological academic sense, it's the problem of evil. That's how it gets taught in academia. Yeah, I've even I might have somewhere still got the little booklet that you can get, the questions about the problem of evil, and it goes through loads of ways of approaching the question and stuff like that. Yeah? But it's a moot question. It's a nonsensical question. There is no answer to it because you're applying skewed presumptions to the inquiry. Yeah? God exists outside of time. So everything within time that is happening is seen or sensed or felt, whatever, by the God, the Godhead, whatever you believe in. Yeah, so applying concepts of time to questions are meaningless. And if God created everything, which is the classic argument of all the big religions, of all this stuff only exists because of their God that they tell you about, then that includes everything that we label as evil. So all the bad people, God created them. All the bad shit that ever happens to you in your entire life that you've ever read about ever, all because it's within the creation that God created. So therefore God created the factors that allowed for that evil to occur. Doesn't that, add up for you? Just, he's not the one causing the evil. We are the ones causing the evil to each other. By choosing to go in opposition to nature, as an interesting aside here, the Egyptian name for one of the gods of life, I think it was one of the gods of life, was Necha. It's Necha. It's very, very similar to the English word nature. So when we talk about the power of nature or the divinity of nature, they were referencing the same kind of stuff back then, and their knowledge and their ideas didn't necessarily originate within their own culture. They were older ideas that they carried forward. But that element of the natural environment and the Godhead being somehow aligned to one side or the other is meaningless. It's a nonsensical question. God is not good or evil. God is just God. It's the generative energy that allows all this to happen. So that, trying to apply the kind of question, why did God let bad shit happen to me? So God didn't let bad shit happen to you. You're in a reality where it has a cause and effect rule within it that means if your physical body gets struck by a burning lump of stone or magma that comes flying out of a volcano, then your body's gonna get squished. You're gonna die. God didn't come along and go, "Oh, look, there's a guy there. I'm gonna make this boulder fly out and hit him." Way. Well, I'm so great. I created this whole thing just so I can torment people. It makes no sense. So, like I said, it's an anthropomorphized thing. You're applying human characteristics and expectations and limitations to something that, it just does not apply. So anyway, I was listening to his stuff, and like I said, he was saying or expressing a lot of things that had been going through my head over the weekend, and it further brought me back to this concept of attrition by love. Yes, I've finally got to actually the point of saying why the title. Attrition is a word that, as far as I remember, the definition of it basically just means the wearing down, the slow grinding down, or the slow loss of matter. So, like a wave beating up against a rock on the ocean, there will be an attrition effect of wearing the rock down. The weathering effect is like an effect of attrition. And a war of attrition is when there's no clear winner on either side. There's no clear advantage on either side. They're just like one for one. You kill one, I kill one. You kill one, I kill one. And they're both slowly losing forces, losing resources into the war. So attrition, a slow wearing down or gradual wearing down of something by love. And, just in that sentence, it might not make a lot of sense, especially if you're trying to apply human characteristics or limitations, expectations to the statement. Maybe you have experienced somebody who wore you down with the way they were. Maybe what they were projecting at you, they were calling love, but you might not have felt that it was that way. And in a similar way, you can get that kind of sort of saccharine, cloying effect of somebody who's just trying too hard to project love out, such that they're fawning, and they seem to be just like wanting to please the person or the thing it is that they're pouring at. So, I love you so much, like celebrity worship kind of thing. That's not what I'm trying to suggest or imply by those words, attrition by love. I'm trying to talk about or point towards that eternal process of you returning back to the source. And like I said, this is a fair bit element of God talk. So if you don't like that kind of stuff, it's just tough. You shouldn't have tuned in. But if there is, this requires a certain number of presumptions. One, that this reality, this experience is not just a random chance of chaotic soup, that there is some kind of pattern or patterns that get enabled and perpetuated by something. What that something is where you then, if you want to debate that, that's up to you. There's so many different versions that can be applicable or attempted to be applied anyway. But there is something that brings pattern and order, repetition, consistency to this experience of seeming chaos, to this quantum soup of energy. There are these forming repetition fractal patterns that emanate through the entire thing that we experience, that we witness, that we participate in. Now, this is partly why I've deliberately mentioned Steve talking about the Fibonacci sequence, because some of those patterns when applied in that kind of both esoteric and exoteric sense, you can see those patterns within the natural world as an emanation of nature, Nature is an emanation of the generative force, of the Godhead energy. The patterns that emerge to me are part of what give me what I feel is enough evidence to say that there is something there. What it is, I'll debate for a long time, but there's something there. This is not just random chance. No, I've looked at lots of information about the random chance, and I don't buy it. I bought some of the books about it, but I just don't buy their conclusions. I don't agree with Richard Dawkins. Thank God for Richard Dawkins, but I don't agree with these materialistic, atheistic conclusions. So, part of the reason why I wanted to get into this, that slow process of attrition by love, this is very much inspired by seeing the kind of reaction in coming from people that, as far as I know, don't create content themselves. They don't put content out onto the internet where they do this kind of thing where they try to, talk to people or interact with people or present them things that hopefully empower them or help them grow or give them that kind of, view of reality as being upwards, of being creative, not destructive, not entropic, but creative, going up the spiral back to the Godhead, not staying stuck in this density, gravitated down in this density. As far as I can see, they don't do anything like that. They just occasionally turn up in chat boxes and they express their frustration and annoyance when the content creator starts doing things that they're not really keen on. So when Steve starts talking about stuff that requires a little bit of thinking, a little bit of attention span, in come all the crappy content, crappy comments and suck account characters who turn up and just throw in one shitty comment and then bugger off again. All that kind of attitude of, oh, you're making me think. I don't want to think. I don't want to think about that shit. I just want to ignore my pain. Oh, my pain. Woe is me. Oh, everything's doomed. Everything's depressive. Everything's entropic. Everything's going down into the shit. Well, if that's the way you're inclined, right, then yeah, that's where you're going. You're building your own world there. You're building your own mousetrap. But that also got me thinking about that constant process, eternal process of attrition by that original source energy. And I'm using the word love here in the title as the meaning of that generative energetic force. I know some people don't like the word force because they think it's a bit of a non-definition. What do you mean by force? The force. Use the force, Luke. But that generative energy that seems to be the wellspring, the fountainhead of where all this comes from, which includes you and me, all of us as well. That process is eternal because it exists outside of time, because time is only an experience that is enabled by being within this three-dimensional reality. God doesn't experience time. So God's got all the time in the world. So when we separate from that original source, when we first, as some people call it, when your soul begins its process into this world, into this experience, when it comes here to learn whatever lessons it is that you're supposed to be learning so that you can go back to the Godhead, it's a little bit how, like, when your parents used to say, go out and play, go out and explore. And you'd go out and you'd run around for a bit and you'd get a bit further out than you've ever been before. And then you start seeing things that make, I'm not sure I ought to go down that direction. Maybe I should head home now. So you start going back home again and you're back to the source. You've been out on your little exploration that allows you to define for yourself your own experience of this reality, your own experiences. So you are exploring for yourself from your totally individual point of view, your absolutely unique subjective perspective of this experience. Nobody else has ever and will never have exactly the same experiences as you. No one ever, ever, ever in the entirety of eternity will have exactly the same experiences as you. So you go out and you do your little exploration, you come back and you bring all those things, all those experiences that you gained, you bring back home to the source with you. So how does the Godhead become the Godhead? It becomes the Godhead by subdividing itself out into everything and doing every single possible exploration of what this thing is, and then coming back to itself and bringing all that information in. Why is it omniscient, supposedly? Because it's got access to every bit of information about what this reality is. So of course it knows everything, because it's part of everything. It is everything. And because it exists outside of time, it can do that forever. So these people that fall into the entropic path and think that materialistic power is where real power lies. Yeah, power lies, L-I-E-S. Get trapped in this density. They never progress back to the Godhead because they've been convinced that this experience is where everything counts. You know, this is where it all happens. And this becomes a moot point because they can't prove that nothing happens after death, and I can't prove that something does happen after death. And that's part of the bargain. You get given this opportunity of free will experience and learning so that you can return to the Godhead. But the price of that process, to be able to actually go through that process, to be in this environment and have those experiences, means you have to subject yourself to a linear, time-based experience. In other words, mortality. So at some point, this flesh suit gets dissolved back into the nature, it gets physically returned back to the source, and you get the opportunity, if you've progressed beyond this density, if you've figured out the fact that this density is just an experience zone, you know, it's a place for learning so that you can gradually rise your way up that spiral and get back to the source, to the Godhead. And that's why, for those people who choose that path, they think, oh, I'm doing better than you, mate. Your life's just shit. You're a loser. Look, you got nothing. I've got the boats. I've got the hose. I've got cocaine for miles, mate. I've got everything. I've got money. I've got guns. I've got houses. I've got everything, mate. But guaranteed, because I haven't figured out those lessons, I'll be coming back again next time. And something else will happen next time to try and help me learn those lessons. And part of that learning is this I'll try and explain myself. This might sound a bit odd, but part of that learning process is their expressions of externalizing their own shadow work onto other people or other beings. Yeah, like, you know, think of people who abuse animals. Yeah, they were externalizing their own shadow work process. They've been unable, incapable, or maybe fearful, or, you know, they're afraid of the pain they might experience if they do it, whatever. Yeah? But they haven't done the esoteric shadow process, so they do it via an exoteric, an outside method of doing it. I've talked before about how, you know, the majority of trolls and other sadistically inclined people that you meet are using you as a whipping post. They're not actually attacking you yourself. They're attacking a reflection of their own fears. So when somebody comes at you, no, you get this a lot in the internet environment, you know, the classic kind of ad hominem attack of, oh, you're talking about hippie shit, you must be a fag, you must be a homo. It's like, oh, right, man, I didn't realize you're scared of homosexuality. You're scared of other naked men. You're afraid that there's men who are just trying to bugger you, and that's why you project this fear expectation onto me. Yeah, you just shown me that you're afraid of me, and you're afraid in a way that reveals much about your own inner insecurities. And that's that shadow work that you should be doing for yourself, like in your own self, mate, not externalizing it out onto others and then not even learning from the process. But anyway, for those people who are stuck on that entropic pathway, they attack others in this materialistic world with this attitude of, oh yeah, I've figured it all out, mate. I got the piles of gold. I got the piles of stuff. You can't prove that there's anything else beyond this that says that I shouldn't just ignore all your moral bullshit and just take whatever I want. Fuck you and your idea of God and life after death and whatever, mate. No. I want it all now that I can experience it, because I can only feel things. I can't think about anything. I can't experience anything that I can't touch or taste. They project onto others their own problems. So they think they're winning when they attack other people. But what is actually occurring is they're going through their own learning process. And if you don't get it this time, that doing that kind of materialistic attitude externalized onto others is not going to progress you anywhere, and you're going to be back here again doing it again. You might not remember it. Part of the common argument used to supposedly debunk a lot of this stuff is the fact that, like, oh well, mate, if that's true, why can't you remember what you did last time you were here? Why don't you remember all these lessons that you learned? Why is it that we seem to come back again and again and again and do it again and again and again? So how do you know that that's what's happening? You can't prove that in the same way as somebody can't prove it doesn't. You've got to be able to falsify something to give it credence. So if you can't even falsify it, and it's a moot point again. Why are you getting stressed about arguing shit like that? It's a non-argument. Those people will go round and round and round. And as far as the Godhead is concerned, this is where, for many people, it gets quite religious and whatever, but I don't see it from I don't stick to any one religious point of view on all this kind of stuff. But for the Godhead has got all the time in existence, because time only exists because the Godhead brought it into existence by creating three-dimensional space. So the Godhead can outweigh you. Even the supposed, in some theological points of view, the supposed, the big bad guy, the Lucifer, the main man, God will outweigh him. He'll keep coming, he'll keep getting stuck in this density until he learns all the lessons, until eventually, attrition by love, he'll realize that actually he wants to come back to the source. Because God doesn't have to wait more than a moment, because time doesn't exist for God. So as far as God's concerned, Lucifer has already returned to the source. So Lucifer has already been redeemed. So a lot of this stuff doesn't seem to add up for many people, because they get stuck in that applying human expectations to concepts that are just outside of that. You can't apply those expectations to these concepts. They're non-applicable. So that attrition by love, what I was trying to imply by that, and why in the subtitle it says, like, that you don't stop until you get enough. If you've got no belief or acceptance at all in reincarnation or life beyond death or anything like that, then all of this will just be meaningless words to you, But when it's meaningless words that have shaped the progress of history via the vehicles of religion for centuries, thousands of years now, then isn't it about time you grew up and got out of that infantile thinking that words don't change the world? It's words repeated from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, that carry those ideas, those concepts those perceptions from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. You can't stab the knowledge into somebody. It doesn't work that way. You can eradicate knowledge by killing it off, but you can't stab. You can't say, "Oh, I'm going to teach you about Lucifer." Stab. Oh, now you know about Lucifer. No, mate, now he's dead. It doesn't work that way. But anyway, that was what I was trying to imply. There is this process going on. If you don't, like I say, if you don't believe in it, you don't accept any of this stuff, then yeah, it's all just meaningless chatter to you. But if you do, if you have any inclination towards that, then I feel if you can see it from that kind of perspective, maybe it makes the concept of the love generation make more sense. This is not about being that kind of fawning or overbearing, like the big mommy state, the big nanny state. That's not what we're talking about here. Well, I'm talking about anyway. I'm talking about that generative force, that energy of creation. If you're in service to creation, if you are adding into creation, then you're on the upward spiral. If you only ever take from creation, if you are on the entropic pathway, it's going down. You're on an express elevator to lower densities, where you'll then have a harder and harder job to find your way back up again. The deeper you go, the heavier you get, and the harder it is to get away from that singularity. Now, one other thing, I said I wasn't going to talk for ages, and I've done it anyway once I started, but I feel this is fairly important, and it is interconnected in many ways. One of the other things I was thinking about recently over this week that started to make a bit more sense to me anyway is based on some of the effects that are attributed symptoms or reactions for people that suffer from what they define as autism. And I'm not trying to get into arguing what autism is or isn't, or what causes it or anything like that. This is just there is a consistency of the information about the experiences of people who suffer from autism. Yeah. One of those consistencies is that for many people who have autistic problems, they have hypersensitivity to certain things. It could just be one of their senses is hyperstimulated, or it could be multiple. And for some of them, it's part of the reason why they seemingly retreat into their own worlds, into their own realities. They seem to live in a different reality to everybody else. And it's, for many of them, it's because that hypersensitivity effect means that they need to exclude some of the noise that we have in this reality. So as a very simplistic reality example, some of them are hypersensitive to loud noises or bright light. Yeah, so if you go around making lots of loud noise, banging pots and pans or whatever, they're going to have an episode. They're going to have an adverse reaction in some manner. It could be that they have a trauma, they have a temper tantrum, or they could just break down, or they could go and try and hide in a cupboard or something. They have a reaction to the overstimulation in their environment. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, if you applied that on a mass scale, not on take what occurs on the individual, on the micro, and then take a step back to the macro and apply that to the global consciousness. This modern society, utilizing these social media platforms, the internet primarily as the vehicle, into smartphone technology, etc., has now provided for us such a level of available stimulus that for many people, they get into the stage where there's just way too much. People can't cope with their Facebook, things like you may have heard this talked about a little bit in the press now and then in recent times. Yeah, people having that kind of burnout effect of social media. But there is an element to that I think links into the same kind of consistencies experienced by people with autism. Because if you're being heavily saturated, overstimulated with certain stuff, that's going to cause you to react in one way or another. And I know I'm not trying to imply the kind of, simplistic effect of them deliberately stoking up a reaction in certain demographics online and stuff like that. No, I'm talking about a very subtle and individual reaction that for many people will become part of their lives without them realizing it. Think of it a little bit like it in the sense of if you had somebody following you around banging pots and pans behind your head all day long, then eventually you're going to learn to zone that out. Yeah, you're going to have to, because otherwise it will drive you insane. So you learn to zone it out, which means in a way you're becoming insulated to certain elements within your environment. That element in that example being the auditory noise around you. Yeah, so you try to ignore the input, the overstimulated input from your hearing, because if you pay attention to it, it drives you mad because this twat keeps banging a saucepan behind your head. Yeah? They apply that to social media and the way more and more people are getting stressed out by the bombardment of information via that internet medium. Some of it is willingly taken on, like people having their internet page, your Facebook page, with however many thousands of friends and whatever, you're going to get a lot of updates and notifications and shit. Yeah? But for many people, I think they're doing it without even realizing that they're taking so much on board, because it just seems to be it's what everybody else is doing. Yeah. And you wouldn't, I say I'm talking, rhetorically, I wonder when I see people walking around with the phone in front of their face, they're walking along like a zombie because they're so in their zone. They're so overstimulated with the sheer amount of information, the amount of input. Johnny 5 need input. The sheer amount of input that they're getting, that they start to shut down other elements of themselves. So similar to the experiences, the consistencies of people who have autism. They can't cope with certain elements of the general reality that we experience. So they, in effect, shut it out, or they build some kind of border within their own mind, to block out that element. So why are people having this insular effect? You probably heard that keyword a while ago, the incel. I suppose involuntary celibate stuff, yeah. But subtle NLP in that word, incel, insular, in a cell. Yeah, they're locked up in their own little worlds, a world that is dominated by the brain in their hand. Yeah, the smart device in the palm of their hand, that's your brain. And that insulating effect, that oversaturation of the senses. I thought as well about going into the etymology of the word saturation. Saturn, saturation. Curious connection there. Yeah, but anyway, are we now witnessing the rise of not only an exponential rise in the number of young children now having autism of one form or another, but also society in general becoming autistic? Because it is being put into these little insular pocket reality bubbles based on their replacing the sensory stimulus that you would normally get from your natural environment has been replaced by this simulated environment provided by the technology. So the only way they can cope is to shut out the other shit. Yeah. Maybe that makes sense. And maybe it makes sense why I wanted to mention it in connection to that attrition by love. Yeah. If you think you're going to win big by being obsessed with purely materialistic point of view on life, then we'll see after, won't we? Yeah, I'll see you on the other side. If neither of us are there, then it will be completely meaningless because we'll all be dead and there'll be nothing after. So you won't be able to gloat at me. But if there is something after, I'm not going to gloat at you. But I'm going to go, there you go. Right, let's get moving. Hopefully that all makes sense. Yeah. Sorry, guys, I did rant for ages once I got started. If anything, yeah, it seems to help to get into the flow.
There's a lot of, I was going to say there's a lot of people will be coming back. That's all I can say. But yeah, a good chat though, Cookie. Well done.
I did wonder, like, some of the arguments about like that kind of perspective is, well, if this reincarnation resolution is true, and there are these religious bodies that claim they can absolve you or redeem you once you turn to their God, what would prevent a never-ending murderer? You know, somebody who goes through their life, they go, oh, I'm going to murder someone because I just feel like it. Stab, stab, stab. Oh, I murdered someone. I better go in the church and repent. I repent. Do you forgive me? Yes, we forgive you because we're an all-loving religion. Now God loves everyone. You are forgiven. Go out and, you know, be in the world. And they go out in the world, go, oh, I want to stab someone again. Stab, 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 stab. Do you see what I mean? If there's this perpetual forgiveness and this perpetual process of being able to come back again and again and again, you could just, and you know, I know this is the kind of dangerous fucking misguided shit that like Charlie Manson was trying to push on people and whatever. Yeah? You can potentially treat this as Disneyland right up until the last day of eternity. And then you can turn to the Godhead and go, oh, I got it wrong. Sorry, mate. Do you forgive me?
No, you can't. You can't do that.
That's what I say, misguided shit.
Well, two reasons that are connected. One is karma.
Yeah,
and the second is he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. And that's one of the things that you sometimes see in literature about murderers. They cover their eyes. Because you look into the eyes of the person you're killing, their computer hard drive is reversing the situation and giving it back to you. So you are now destined to be killed by somebody else. That's how karma will or can work out. Yeah? But this whole thing about Dawkins and that, you know, Dawkins got it wrong from the start, and that's one of the things that Dawkins used to do a lot in his talks. He'd run 2 or 3 ideas together, and then give you the one that he wants you to answer, giving you 2 given pieces of information to get there. You know, he'd stack them up. And one of the things he always used to say was, people believe in God because they fear death, and that's completely wrong. Because the first understanding of God is that it's going to be like your parents who loved you, but bigger.
Yeah.
And so what you fear is having that love taken away. But that's why I conclude that Dawkins had no love as a child. And that's why a lot of the elites deliberately have no love as children.
Well, they get put through boarding schools and things like this, don't they? So the disconnection with the parent starts at a young age.
Yeah. And the separation from any concept of there being something more than just the material experience.
Yeah, or if their own mind, they sit down and extrapolate what they already know and just magnify it, it becomes, you know, a kind of harsh thing like the Illuminati, where they can sacrifice you or whatever. You know, it's just a bigger version of what they've already known.
Yeah.
So if you start off life in a loving environment, your expectations are gonna magnify that. And you know that again, that doesn't just say, oh well, people only believe in God because they had nice loving parents and they want things to go on and be better and better. No, it's supposed to be that way. It was designed that way. Nature.
Well, see the effect killing has on human beings. You know, when you kill another human being, look what it does to soldiers. Look how it affects the mental health of people over time. So it's something that is wrong. You know, we're not a violent people, human race. We don't really do this stuff.
Well,
you know,
one of the other things I thought about trying to include, but you know, as it was, that was like nearly an hour and a half, wasn't it? But the element of, because I mentioned about the equilibrium thing,
yeah.
Is there an element where the good ends up outnumbering the bad, simply because the bad is such a concentration of power within this density that you only need one of them to equate to, 100,000 good people. Think of it a little bit like ecosystems where, for example, like your Tyrannosaurus Rex, you could only have one Tyrannosaurus Rex within a certain distance because they require a certain amount of food source available to them. In that respect, you could say like the Tyrannosaurus Rex being the bad guy, the psychopathic predator, and the herbivore animals that it predates on would outnumber it by a large degree. Do you see what I mean?
I don't think so. You're falling into their trap of seeing things polarized, bad versus good. Whereas bad is relative, and we're leaving evolution out of the thing. And I was putting in the chat just a little while back that a guy, Charles Hinton, mathematician, very Christian bloke, reckons that evolution is the escape from pain. And I put in the chat as well that, Debbie mentioned something about having questions, lots of questions. And I said, well, when you can't even put your questions into words, you can't find the answers. And that's the definition of ignorance. And that is a form of pain, not even being able to voice or shape the questions that you have. That is a form of pain. And to address that pain, we developed intelligence. And so, evolution is definitely a factor. So that even if the world right now is a balance between good and bad, it's relative. The bad used to be freezing cold and wild animals. Now it's ignorance. And
well, it's materialism. That's, evolution's been hijacked by materialism, if you like, or that greed and that the working, the money system, things like this, which create the wanting of more gold coins and that stuff, and accumulating more and having
partly
power. Sorry, go on.
That's partly why I was thinking of it that way, mate. Is it the truly what you would call bad people are few and far between? The majority of people that you encounter that might be bad or do something bad to you or someone are more than likely only doing that bad stuff because they're forced into a situation like you're describing. Yeah, maybe they're even to the point of they fell for the bullshit that, I'm going to be a gangster because I can, get the money and the boats and the hoes if I'm a gangster. But really, they're not doing it because they are a bad person in and of themselves. They're doing it in the environment that they've been put into.
Well, also, I think because we are evolving and we're trying to evolve away from pain, we can't really put a lot of the pain that people are feeling in the world into words. And so the answer is unknown. And what these people are doing, they're simply trying to come up with the old answers and saying, well we can have a huge accumulation of food. Maybe that would be the answer we're looking for. Oh, we can accumulate money and feel secure materially. Maybe that's the answer we're looking for, because it was the answer once. But the real answer is obviously not been found yet, or it's not been understood by people. So they're trying to answer the new questions with the old answers.
Yeah, but I think it's that also that what you mentioned right at the end of that talk, Cookie, about the overstimulus and that social media impact that's had a huge impact on everybody across the planet. You'd say, it hasn't touched many people. They want all the all the satellites up to get coverage in Africa and all over. They want the whole globe covered in this internet. So everybody has a computer or a screen, so they can all interact with it. And like you say, this overstimulus of the brain, and the brain freeze. And
again, Peter, I think they're still trying to answer those old medieval problems of people being cold and hungry, and needing something to consume, needing those comforts. That's what they're looking for. And now they're looking for the superabundance of comforts. What can stimulate your mind? Oh, we've got millions of things that can stimulate your mind. We've got thousands of different flavour foods. And they're still trying to answer.
But you still have to. If you lose yourself in this reality, say you live like that, and you're completely lost in it, and then you're going to die. Yeah. So then you're going to realise, where was I? Where was all that? Looking back and thinking that's all you did was wear a mask and pretend to be something else, and avatars and whatever, and the internet and virtual reality, and you realize you haven't lived, you haven't had a connection with nature, and things of this type. So, would you want to come back? Do you have a choice? There's the light, the source, the sort of the karmic wheel, or whatever you want to call it. This, I do go along with the karma thing, and I think, yeah, definitely we've all been here many times, I believe. Those who are here now listening, I think we've had many, many lifetimes. Not some, not so many as others. And I think there is that kind of, we're in this, I just think in the universal game of some nature, this kind of way that we're all dealing with this good and bad and evil down here, and how we're all, not very nice to each other and all the rest of it, and these ideologies that are put out there, and the gradualism, moving towards these sort of, I suppose you'd call, yeah, the sort of transhumanism, and that sort of, we're just merging with this bloody thing, and everybody seems to be thinking it's a great thing, and the computer runs your world and everything else, whereas you just sit back and let it all happen. So, we're finding ourselves sort of thinking we don't want this. This is, it's not in our hearts to be, like that anyway. Like I say, how do people feel when they've killed another human being, for instance? I don't know. I've never killed one, but you see soldiers and people fucked up all the time. So there's something not right about what we're doing to each other. We know what's right and wrong. We know we just have to get less emotionally retarded and start to wake up to our emotions and deal with our shit and look in the mirror and do the stuff that we've been talking about for a long time. Get to know yourself and have a relationship with yourself first before you can have a relationship with anybody else. And that's what's not taught to the youth or the kids, and the education system, as we know, is not teaching any of this stuff. So in the modern world, if you like, or the West, we end up with this chaos and, like I say, this overstimulus, and we're just putting coping mechanisms in for ourselves to make us feel like happy. So we play our little game on the phone or whatever, or that's the sort of society we seem to have built, where everyone can escape, like you say, in their little zone, but zone out completely and even end up in an accident because they're not looking where they're going. And it's, this is the sort of society they want, and it's dumbed down as well. And the magic pills they keep throwing at you, like you mentioned, it's, nothing's really holding people in their space, is it? They seem to be running for some kind of medication or some kind of, I don't know, attacking people like us who talk like this, because they just melt down or whatever. But it's
the space has become androgynous and amorphic. It's constantly in flux. Whatever the next trend is, that they're expected to change their form to match the new trend. So it's like there's no stability there. And that again suits that agenda to get people hooked into that internet virtualized personality where you can be whatever you want to be moment by moment.
At the risk of sounding boring, I think it tells us something about how deep the racial memory of being hungry, etc., goes. That people can still look to that more and more as the answer to everything. Yeah, it shows how deep that lack was in people. That so many generations of being hungry and etc. And now more and more is the answer. And again, you have that thing, and once your belly is full, that desire goes away, and it's sort of difficult to focus on, why that isn't the answer. Well, maybe I ate the wrong food, maybe this, maybe that. Yeah. And the transgender thing, one thing I've noticed nobody's ever mentioned is how much more women are supposed to enjoy it than men. And I think that's a big subliminal thing that nobody ever mentions. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's one of those myths that I think has driven a lot of men. Like, oh, well, I'll be a woman, I'll enjoy it more.
Yeah, well, I'm a lesbian too, I've even got the beard and everything.
But yeah, I think that karmic stuff though, definitely for me, I think it's how far you've gone or how far you are along your journey in your soul and whatever. And at some point within this incarnation, you'll get to a point where you'll question it, and then you'll begin to grow quicker. And the quicker you grow here, and the more you get it, the better I think you are at, achieving some kind of what you call easier ride, where you're not don't have to come back.
Yeah.
I don't want to go back here. But yeah,
So-
it's I don't know. Maybe you come back because you want to come back, because it's just the way it works out. But I think the way that they've got the current state of the world and planet, to come back, to keep coming back. I mean, at the moment, it feels as though that you're stepping into an even worse pit than you was maybe 100 years ago. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe at each level, it's still a pit. It's still difficult. It's still hard. It's tough, because you go through the ages of our ancient ancestors and all the rest of it. It was never an easy. We haven't had an easy sort of what you call evolution in that sense on the planet. It's always been tough and hard to survive, and now we've got some kind of what you call semblance in the West of some kind of comfort, but at the same time we've got all this war and all our governments on our behalf going out and creating chaos, and then bringing it back home to where we live as well, and bringing it over to every country and touching everybody with this fear. And it just seems that there is some kind of massive game going on here, and the dark and the light are at battle, and it's like there is this kind of, like you say, I think nutrition by love. Yeah, it's like the wearing that, it's because that's what it ultimately is. We know it. People want to run away from it, but that's what we are. We are love. Get over it. We're part of the universal love of the universe, and everyone goes, "Oh yeah, hippie fucker." It's like, no, it's like
they think it means weakness.
Yeah, weakness.
It's completely the opposite.
Get it? Yeah.
Because if you're so frightened of that concept of love, that means you're not likely to ever get in a partnership where you would have children. So your lineage is gone. So if you're talking about weakness, what is it that your species, using all these materialistic, atheistic attitudes, what else is your species meant to do other than perpetuate itself? If everything is just random chance chaos soup, then the only meaning you have is to perpetuate your own species. So in that respect, if you say it's weak to express love or to see that principle of love, then you really back to front. Yeah.
You might be you might have a slightly wider appeal if you use the word happy.
Happy.
I think that's a word that people can sort of say, yeah, it takes a while since I've been happy.
It's open to selfishness, though, mate. People will confuse that with a narcissistic attitude of self-satisfaction.
Exactly, it's the consumer, and that's people used to do their day's work. They would do their day's work and get warm. They'd have their meal, and then they'd sit down for some intellectual food, which was a different kind. It's a different kind of food from consuming. Yeah. But now they've corrupted that, so that all the intellectual food is to be consumed. Yeah, people don't sit and take time to reflect on intellectual food. It's supposed to be digested at the same speed as everything else.
5 fast facts that you need to know.
Oh yeah. And that you'll forget and probably read again tomorrow and think, oh, that sounds interesting.
Because the whole idea is to just keep saturating you with more and more bits of whatever.
I think it's simple in life. Simple things just cause no harm or loss and have a good life. It's as simple as that, really. And what more can you say?
I was going to say, in a similar example to karma, for the people that maybe don't want to see it as being applicable after your physical death, but I'm sure they can see how it is applicable. They maybe change the name of it to something that suits their biases more. But if you go around treating everybody like an arsehole, if you're going around being an absolute I won't say it, but you get what I mean. Yeah, you're more likely going to get a punch in the face eventually. Yeah, sooner or later you're going to meet somebody who will give you one for being an arsehole. So if you can see that's basic karma. That's what we're talking about here. So you think that's not applicable to the energy that was what you call you, because that's another very misused word, because that's applicable to your egoic self that develops within each experience. So you think that if karma applies to you being an arsehole to people, they, eventually somebody's going to give you a slap. The same thing applies in your entire life. You go through your entire life being an arsehole, you're going to get a slap back to the beginning of the game again. And you'll have to do it all over again. And maybe this time you'll be the victim being subjected to somebody who was like you were.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beatty put an interesting comment in the thing. I mentioned heaven, and he said you can never hit heaven. It's an unachievable target. And I think this, talking about reincarnation as we have done, you've got to think of your body as the bow. Yeah, your dying body is the bow, and your soul is the arrow. Now that's why you shouldn't carry any grudges or anything, because you start thinking about that next life and think, oh, that bastard, yeah, he hurt me in this life, and you don't want to aim your arrow there. So you want to let karma take care of it. Vengeance will be mine, saith the Lord. Let karma. It does work.
Let it go. Let it go.
Moby Dick.
And on the reincarnation there, Pete, you said about previous generations it's been easier. I think we've got to face a really nasty fact here, that the kind of love and that you have here with family and friends gets translated into the soul without any people, without any identities. It's a feeling of love that you have to learn here, not the individuals themselves. And in past generations where people were suffering but they had families to hold on to, I'm not sure that was the ideal, if you see what I mean. Because the way that our experiences get transformed into the soul is not immediately apparent, and it can also be a bit cold. But what can be better than learning from a set of individuals love, forgetting those individuals, and then taking it out and giving it to everybody? So I think that is the purpose kind of thing, if you see what I mean, which sounds very harsh to the people in this life. But for a life full of people who are self-obsessed, well, for the self-obsessed individual that does learn the path, well, good luck, yeah? They got to have those ties. And it's tricky territory, but there is a big difference between the lessons we learn for life and the ones that transform into the soul to learn something that we can take.
Yeah, like an experience, or I know what you mean. There's a different level, isn't it? And then you see, it's like the bigger picture. It's like looking at yourself, isn't it? Sort of thing. Thinking, hang on a sec.
If there's a heaven, everybody there is your family.
Self-analyze, don't you, as well?
If there's a heaven, everyone can play guitar. Remember those Radiohead lyrics, I think. Yeah.
And then the energy side of things, there's plenty of information out there to tell you we are energy, we're energetic, and we're all rich, we're stardust, really, So it's there's lots going. There's lots of things that people even feel their own energy, and they deny they even feel their own energy system,
Even for those materialistic-minded people, if you're not in, like I said earlier about the other stuff, if you're not interested in the concepts of God, if you think it's all just words and whatever, then the concept of karma can still make sense to you in a materialistic world. You just apply cause and effect.
Yes.
If you want to have a good life, then try being nice to other people. Try being a good person. You're more likely to end up in situations where you're surrounded by other good people, so you have a good life. It's just simple common sense, really, isn't it? But it gets mystified and turned into religions and all other kinds of ridiculous, useless shit.
And then nice people on the flip side get taken advantage of. So again, we're living in a society at the moment that hasn't kind of got there. There's individuals and groups that are good people, but then there's also, as you mentioned, Rookie, there's lots of people who would like to come in and disrupt and do whatever because they're at that level. So it's at the level of like, where are you? Where's your understanding? Where's your gnosis or whatever it is? Or what have you gone away and thought about anything? What's your life experiences or whatever? So, but on the internet, as we know, with this platform, it's an open, anyone can listen in and comment or whatever. So but you'll get all kinds of stuff, positive and negative, and that's just how it rolls. Like you were saying, it's just that question of keep moving forward. As you always used to say years ago, just keep moving forward and keep doing what you're doing. And that's exactly what we do. And people will come in and say whatever or do whatever, and we just keep moving forward and keep doing the stuff we do. So.
Not, I think it might have been the other week, whatever, not so long ago, I heard the argument from the point of view of that if people suggest that you just keep talking about stuff, then they are in effect serving satanic purposes, because you never actually get into any kind of conclusion where things are resolved and dealt with, etc. And I think it's just such desperation to force people into certain alignments, to get them to acquiesce. Talk about being in a cult. You're not allowed to talk about stuff. You have to just agree.
Yeah.
So, do I really, mate? No. See the finger. But that, to me, I'm never trying to suggest that people should never actually do anything or get to some kind of conclusion or take action in whatever. That's not what I'm suggesting. But if you're not talking with each other about it, you've only ever got your own subjective point of view to apply to whatever questions or problems that you're looking at. That's one brain, one spirit. Why not, network that? You'll get much better answers and results from the problems or questions that you're looking at. Because multiple people looking at it from their own subjective point of view, it's like looking at a puzzle from every direction possible. You're trying all possible combinations of the puzzle because everybody does a little bit of that combination.
Yeah. It's funny that I was just thinking so many people come to the same conclusion but then get attacked for it, or so that it's not any thinking, hang on a second, I don't know, everybody's looked at things and had questions, and now that, as we know, because we talked about it over the last few weeks and months, about this sort of labeling of people questioning anything outside the mainstream narrative or something that's happened, and then they've just got another questions to ask because things don't add up, considered mentally ill, or whatever, or considered to be like in a cult, like you say, or that's just cult thinking. It's like, well, yeah, at the end of the day, you sort of got a pair of eyes and ears, and I'm thinking, hang on a sec, that doesn't look right to me. Well, that doesn't sound right. Or these spells that you talk about, these word spells that they use on you, and you get to understand how to, look at things and, like you say, go through the trivium sort of approach to stuff or whatever, and start to actually examine stuff and see it for what it is, or then the pennies drop and you think, okay, so you're working on that kind of sort of energy, and that's where people should be going with it, not sort of running away from it or being scared of it or something, because it's our evolution. It's what we're supposed to know. It's the knowledge we should all know, and the hidden knowledge and the stuff that's been taken really and hidden and used against us in that negative way you talk about, through the governments, through the manipulation, the lies and the cheating and the deceit and everything else that's been going on for millennia, to keep us in the dark, constantly in the dark.
I want to know if, because I've been accused of this many times in the past, I want to know if supposedly I'm a cult leader and this is a cult, then where the fuck are all my wives? Come on, every cult leader always has like a harem full of women. Where are all my wives? Where is my fleet of Rolls-Royce cars? Come on, cough up. You're all supposed to hand over all your property and wealth to me, as well as your children. Where's all my shit? Where's the contracts? Where's the letters that I've sent you saying you got to give me all your stuff? Ridiculous shit.
Even with the trolls, I think some of the people saying, "Oh, why aren't you offering solutions?" A part of it is the problem that the internet is like your iPhone, which is like talking to your parents, which is like reading your own notes back. People forget that, they're not talking to their own psyche because it's always a screen. If you're in real life, I'm talking to Cookie, I know him already. I know we've had conversations, blah, blah, blah. Or you talk to somebody else in real life and I don't know this person, they're a stranger. But the internet becomes so familiar, like your phone or talking to your family or whatever, you automatically assume that the other people know so much more about you that they'll know that when you say, oh, why aren't you offering solutions? You've sat there and said, what should I be doing in my life? Why isn't somebody telling me? And then you go to somebody's hangout and you say, where are your solutions? You haven't got them. They're telling you something about themselves. They've been through this thought process. What you're hearing is the 5th step in their thought process. And they automatically assume that you will understand that. But they just look like a troll. And some of them are.
And they're externalizing authority onto you to give them an answer.
Yeah, because the differences in relationship have all been squeezed into one. It's the net. It's and they are spying on you. I mean, Cookie knows what I was looking at this afternoon on YouTube, and he's mentioned it already in the.
I've been reading your mind.
Yeah, that's it. The internet reads your mind, so everyone knows what you're thinking. And
I've got one solution to hand right now. It's in this cup. Yeah, you take coffee granules, you add water, mix it all. That's the solution. Yeah, coffee.
Talking about it is the start of the solution, and to discuss it and to keep people's awareness there, you know.
Yeah.
Or very often it's like, you know, a group of people passing around a life belt. Yeah? I mean, what happens to people who stop coming to these chats? You know, they start sinking again.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to sink if you're on your own.
Yes, absolutely. And it's similar. And I'd say again, you know, just tripping over my own words, it's like that saturation effect. If you think if you feel that you're going through this experience, this process all on your own, it's a hell of a lot harder to tread water against that oncoming flow that is coming at you. Whereas if you see the reality is that you're not the only person with these questions or the only person that sees these patterns, or whether there's other people seeing it as well, it gives you more buoyancy. Yeah, the reality of them being so desperate, say them as in the usurpers, the controllers, whatever you want to call them, their desperation comes across, it emanates through the constant bombardment of propaganda of anyone who's got these questions is a conspiracy theorist. Anyone who thinks this way is insane. You should all ignore them, you know. And it's like they're standing at the end of your road with loudspeakers saying, questioning is not allowed, questioning is not allowed. And all the sheep are walking around going, oh, I better not say anything.
Even though I have questions, I'm not going to say anything.
Keep it all to myself. And then you feel more alone, isolated. You're more easily swamped by that saturation effect.
It's that fear thing. I mean, speaking out, we used to say back in the day, speak out, say your thing, do your YouTube channel, speak out, do your Facebook or your social media, and, you know, post stories about, you know, things that can, you know, get people thinking and all the rest of it. But then that's all turned into fake news and all the other bullshit, hasn't it?
So I was just very distracted. Cardini posted a comment and I thought, I should reply like, are you offering, mate? Because I'm not that way inclined. Maybe you should have worded it differently.
I think it's the way you just sat there and said, where's my haro? He came across a bit like...
But it's one of those classic things that they've fed into this environment, that because people have been so encouraged to revel in their faux individuality, because it is faux individuality. F-A-U-X means fake, imitation, individuality. So everybody can be an individual by all wearing a black leather jacket. Yeah, it's that kind of shit. So when they're presented with this concept that, oh, you know, you got to be careful of the cults out there. If you agree with him, that means you're in a cult. And they're so afraid of being accused of that kind of thing that they will make every effort to make sure they never do associate with anyone else. Do you get how the reverse psychology works now, folks?
Yeah.
You want to make sure that groups of people don't get together and organize and do things for them. You just tell them they're in a cult and they'll all run away from each other like crazy.
No, I think what's backfired on them is something you're talking about are bad people outweigh the good, and the good people are usually creative, but bad people are always bad in the same way, and it gets boring. And this time I think they've taken contempt a little too far with the Novichok and the anti-Russian stuff. they've looked, they've talked among themselves and said, okay, let's get the mainstream media to print this story. The fucking sheep will believe it. They're so stupid. And that contempt, they've taken it a bit too far. And you read the comments in the Daily Mail, which is very right wing. None of them were buying that Russian poisoning story. Nobody. Yeah, I mean, think about that. What Theresa May and her government must have thought when they read those Daily Mail comments, and they thought, this is the average Englishman. Fucking hell, 90% of them just don't buy it. They just don't believe it. And so, they're quite glad about these hurricanes and natural disasters, yeah, because people aren't buying those fake news stories anymore. Yeah.
I just keep hearing the melody from an old song. It's just like Novichok, Novichok, ooh, Novichok, Novichok, and you're dead. Oh dear, Novichok, Novichok. It's just, that's how, to me, that when I agree with you totally, and when I'm looking at that stuff, it just makes me feel like I'm looking in through the window of the insane asylum. Yeah, so somebody has done a dirty protest into somebody else's coffee mug, and now supposedly it's Novichok and Russian agents and all kinds of silly shit. Yeah? And they expect people to just buy it because it's coming from an authority figure.
Well, looking in through the window of one of those old National Front meetings, it's the Russians, they're going to come for us with their Novichok. And you think, oh my God, you've got to be an idiot to watch this. And the audience were all like skinheads and it's the Russians and their Novichok. But no, this is the mainstream media and what they're feeding to the people. Oh my God.
Maybe it's the sodomite Bolsheviks, and it's not actually Novichok, it's Novichok.
Oh, who was that? Corbett today. His video today was quite good, wasn't it? Yeah. Reminding you about the old World War II propaganda against the Germans. And showing you they're making cartoons of Assad of Syria, like sitting in a bath full of blood. And I mean, just how bloody ridiculous is it? Yeah, I mean the guy wanted to be an optician, for fuck's sake. Yeah? He wanted people to see clearly. They murdered his father, they murdered his brother, and he's like, oh shit, I'm going to be president. And he got on and did the job. And I think he's a good man at heart. Yeah. I mean, when you see him in those interviews, he actually did seem a little bit, war's war. We've got to drop bombs on people, whether they're barrel bombs or ordinary bombs, makes no difference, But,
bomb's a bomb.
I want to be killed by a Baroque bomb. So I just thought it was quite appropriate. I had this picture open ready to use, and that old First World War propaganda, yeah. But
that was Lord Kitchener, wasn't it? But it almost split an image of the king at the time, who was Edward, and who had the same moustache.
Yeah. So they were probably related, or they're certainly in the same clubs.
And that should say, you will vote again. For what, we don't know, but I'm sure it'll be another Brexit. Oops, I said it, sorry.
Oh, was it Javid? Or some? Yeah, he was saying that he wants to have another referendum.
That's right. Yeah.
That was in the news today. So he's actually directly calling now for another referendum.
Yep. I've seen it more and more.
It's official. Well, as official as his personage makes it. Yeah. All right, guys, it's 10:30. I can feel my voice cracking now, so, and I'm getting fed up of snorting snot. So I'm going to wind it up. Thanks for joining in.
Cheers, Cookie. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone in the chat. There's been loads of chat. I will read through it after, or maybe tomorrow, but I will read through it. So thank you for joining in the chat and participating. Oh yeah, there's loads in there. Cool. Give me a good read for tomorrow. Oh man. Yeah, I think I should shut up there. Thanks for giving us your attention, folks, for a couple of hours or so. We'll be back again Wednesday night with the reality chat, and there are plenty of other brands available. Raconteur News should be back on soon again, I think, shouldn't it?
Tomorrow. It should have been tonight. But
no, they won't.
Yeah, I noticed they didn't do one tonight, so maybe they've had a night off as well. So, but yeah, there's plenty of good stuff out there for you to have a look at and learn from. Don't believe the hype and the bullshit from the system. They will lose, guaranteed. It's already decided. So they already have lost. We just got to get through the process of bringing that into reality. Anyway, yeah. Thanks again, folks. Take care. I will cough at you again soon. Press the button.